The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
I saw a pale horse.
The beast.
We're told in the book of Revelation.
This is not a human child.
Isn't an angel Satan?
Armageddon is almost upon us.
Order the use of nuclear weapons.
The world is a fine place and worth fighting for.
From one end of the world to the other, I will oppose you.
They're here.
Welcome to the end of the world.
Wrestling not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities. This is PID Radio.
Talking about whatever from a ridge high above the Missouri Ozarks. Welcome to PID Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and welcome to our humble bunker. I'm so glad you decided not to re-record that. Sometimes it takes us many tries to start a show. But
No.
I love the way that started. And let me explain why you opened that way, because just before he started the recording, he and I were having a discussion about privy politics.
In a literal sense. Yeah.
In a very literal sense. And we were discussing Red Wing and what the role of various attendants within the Privy Chamber were. And there was one attendant who had a very private job to help the king or queen in the very private, smallest room of the chamber, of the apartment. And it sounds like a gross job, and I'm sure it was, but I was telling Derek that it was a job considered, everybody was trying to get it.
Right.
Because it gave you one-on-one time when the king or queen was stuck in a room. It's sort of like when I'm in the bathroom, he immediately comes in. Hi, got you alone.
Yeah.
Now let's talk.
Scratch me.
Mm-hmm. You're not doing anything else. You may as well just scratch me. Mm-hmm. Well, it was a time when you had the king's ear, because what else was he going to do?
He wasn't going anywhere.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah.
So it was a good time to try to get your point across.
Even though it was not, one would think by our modern standards, a very pleasant job, it was one where you got access to the king or queen that nobody else had.
Well, everybody who were the personal attendants within the Privy Chamber had a better chance of accessing the king or queen. But that particular job, you were all alone.
Yeah. Well, and this came up because we were discussing the Red Wing group that Sharon established at Facebook.
We're having such a good time. I am so loving the participation in that group. It reminds me of the weight loss group that I have. And everybody in the weight loss group, of course, we're all discussing, health issues.
Sure.
Well, in the Red Wing Saga group, we discuss various aspects of reading and writing fiction, but it's mainly about the characters within the Red Wing Saga. And the people there have the best attitude. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah. And it's fun because the people who are reading your novels, and you've been very gracious in letting me read them before anybody else, which I think is
I so
cool.
value your opinion. Gracious, nothing. I need that feedback. So thank you.
It is, for a guy like me who as a kid, my favorite form of fiction was hard science fiction, Asimov, Larry Niven, Robert Heinlein, stuff like that. This is a little bit of a departure, but I also love history. And because you work so much history in, I find that intriguing. But more than that, you draw realistic characters and they respond in realistic ways. They're not perfect. And unlike a lot of traditionally Christian fiction, the stuff that we saw at the CBA conferences that we attended back years, almost more than a decade ago now, not all of the protagonists are lily white and responding to everything. And well, I don't want to denigrate anybody, but they sometimes those protagonists in those stories don't respond in ways that are really human, because a lot of times our human emotions get the better of us.
And even though you have a character that is one of the primary, characters in the story, I try to write them realistically in that they don't always behave in ways that the reader wants them to.
Right.
Sometimes they make choices that the reader's just sitting there going, "You are an idiot."
Right.
How come he or she would never do that? Yeah, they would if they were real people.
Yeah. And so these stories I find engaging. I read through them very, very quickly, as you've seen, and I yeah, Sharon likes to laugh while I'm reading because she sees me making faces, smiling, laughing, or, reacting with surprise or whatever at various scenes.
And sometimes crying.
And sometimes crying, yes. She read 3 scenes to me from the forthcoming book this past week and got me all 3 times. And it is a lot of fun for me to see other people responding in the same way and responding as enthusiastically as I am, because it makes me feel, because I've known that you've had the stories inside you. You were talking about Red Wing when we first met more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So this has been a long process. This is not suddenly, boom, overnight success. She's on her 4th novel now all of a sudden. And certainly in terms of sales numbers, this isn't,
Oh, hardly. No.
Jackie Collins or John Grisham territory.
Oh, no. The funny thing is that the number that have been sold is actually, in some countries, it's considered a bestseller.
Yeah,
especially in this genre.
Praise God. But what I think is most satisfying, I guess is the word I'd choose, to me, is seeing other people responding and seeing now what I've seen inside of you and heard from you for the last 2 decades. So I think this is just really awesome. So if you're not a member of the group, if you're listening at home and you're not a member of the Facebook group for Red Wing Saga, and you enjoy good historical fiction from a Christian perspective, join the group. First of all, just find out what those people are, because it's a wonderful group of people who are really enthusiastic about these characters.
It's a whole lot of fun. It's relatively small. The group's only been around a few weeks. We've got about 235 members right now.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a closed group, and the only reason for that is so that it's not readily offered to anybody and everybody. You get an awful lot of spammers and bots and people and non-people who will join groups.
And you don't need that.
No, you really don't.
This is a little refuge, a little corner to say, hey, this is something I find interesting, and let's share this together and just let's sit here, have a cup of tea and chat.
Exactly. Well, in fact, Derek and I are sitting here and drinking tea right now. So all you have to do is just go. You can find it on the Facebook. It's just The Red Wing Saga. But you will link to this in the show notes.
Yep.
But I share it on my Facebook wall now and then. And there are just 2 questions you have to answer. And they're really easy. One is asking how you knew about the group. And the other one is, have you read the books? Mm-hmm. So as long as you answer the questions, it could be, I don't care if you've read the books. You can say no. That helps me to know you're a real person.
Right, yeah.
That you've answered the questions.
Yeah, because we don't want to inflict others with bots. Yeah.
No. So anyway, we're having a good time. But I found it really interesting watching these historical soap operas like Versailles and The Tudors, and to a certain degree, Vikings, which is a different sort of soap opera. But looking at the ones of Versailles and The Tudors, they've got historical advisors that help them to maintain as much historical accuracy as possible, while still making a compelling storyline that keeps us, tuning in with each episode. I've learned a lot. But one of my favorite things about watching these shows is seeing how not just the politics within the throne room play out, but how the interaction with the environment plays out. And you and I were talking about this the other day. One of the things that Louis XIV in Versailles says over and over again, and I suspect that the real Louis said this, was that appearance is everything.
Yeah.
Well, that's the same with geopolitics today.
Oh, absolutely.
Appearance is everything.
Absolutely it is. And we can go a lot of directions from there. But
well, I thought I'd just bridge over to that.
Yeah, because there are a lot of things done in politics that are specifically for appearance's sake, for marketing. Mm-hmm. This is something I had to learn when I was program director of the radio station back in 89 and 90, that that image is reality, and that really is true. We try to be as real as we can be on this program, but we know that if we're going to be say in front of a camera, I mean, we're not going to go out there dressed in what we'd wear just lounging around the house on a Saturday, just to create a certain image.
Yeah. For instance, on camera, I always wear makeup. You choose not to. But I do. I put on makeup just because frankly, it gives me eyebrows and some real eyes. But at home, I never wear makeup at home.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'll typically shave on a weekday, which on a weekend is kind of optional for me. So, but anyway, in politics, that's taken to a whole nother dimension. And we're seeing that now, sadly, in the case of the teens from Parkland, Florida.
Yeah.
The students at Stoneman Douglas High School who saw 17 classmates and teachers, in the case of the security guard football coach, killed, in some cases right in front of their faces, right in front of their eyes. And it's horrible. And in the days that followed, a number of students were interviewed. Of course, that's what news producers do. Let's, the old, it's crude saying, but it's true. If it bleeds, it leads. So let's get these kids on camera and show them crying and reacting. And then within a couple of days, it went from the reaction of the teens to the horror of seeing friends gunned down in the hallways of the school where they spent the majority of their waking hours in any given week, to pushing a particular agenda as regards gun ownership in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And that's being done from both sides of the aisle.
It is. What was really remarkable in the case of the students from this high school is how well-spoken these students seem to be and how they seem to focus on a relatively cohesive and focused narrative in terms of talking points. And I use that phrase deliberately because, as it turns out now, a couple of weeks after the fact, to their credit, BuzzFeed, which is not a conservative news outlet,
no, hardly,
has disclosed that within a day of the incident, anti-gun activists and politicians began getting in touch with the students to offer their assistance. And the picture that emerges from this BuzzFeed article, which I'll link to in the show notes, is that these students appear to have been put out in front of a parade that these other people are actually leading. Mm-hmm. Because from an image standpoint, and this is the point that gets back to Louis XIV hiring
He hired a fiction writer to write his history.
Right. Which, was actually repeated in the Obama administration because his deputy national security advisor, Ben Rhodes, was a wannabe novelist.
Exactly. It's done all the time.
Yeah.
In fact, the idea of wag the dog.
Yes. And in fact, we'll talk more about Rhodes in a minute because apparently he's setting up a shadow national security council. So what's happened is these teens are put out there as the face of gun control, of a gun control movement. They're pushing to organize a what's called March for Our Lives. The tentative date is March 24th. And the media, for the first couple of weeks, was putting this out there as, aren't these students remarkable that they're organizing all of this and they're getting all this coordination and they're showing up in all of these nationally syndicated news programs and talk shows and so forth. And now BuzzFeed on February 27th reported that major players and organizations, and I'm quoting from the article now, including Everytown, Giffords, MoveOn.org, and Women's March LA, are helping with logistics, strategy, and planning for the March for Our Lives rally and beyond. Now, who are these groups? Everytown for Gun Safety is mostly a creation of former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, who's one of the wealthiest men on the planet. This organization just got a $1 million donation from entrepreneur and philanthropist Eli Broad. MoveOn.org, of course, a major progressive political action committee that's been all in the news since, isn't
it funded by Soros?
Yep. Planned Parenthood, which says it hasn't been in direct touch with the students, but is working through Giffords. Now, Giffords was a group founded by Gabrielle Giffords, the former congressperson from Arizona, who was shot in the head.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, of course, has been very active in speaking out for gun control.
I can understand that.
And that's understandable. But one of the key parts of the story here is you scroll about a third of the way down the page. Democratic U.S. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was formerly the chair
DNC chair.
Right. And a resident of Broward County, where this took place for more than 30 years, told BuzzFeed News she's been in touch with students from Marjory Stoneman Douglas since the day after the shooting, helping them connect to state legislators and plan their trip to Tallahassee last week. So Wasserman Schultz got in touch. helped the students set up a trip to Washington, D.C., where they posted selfies during their return flight. One student posted a selfie with Bernie Sanders. The American Federation of Teachers, which helped bus students and parents to Tallahassee multiple times in the week after the shooting, also assisting with the March for Our Lives rally. So again, progressive and anti-gun, or yeah, I guess that's an accurate way of describing it. Activists basically have put the students out there. And again, from an image standpoint, because it's a lot more difficult for people who see these 16 and 17-year-old kids who are grieving for the loss of their friends, family members. It's a lot easier. It's a lot more difficult, let me say, to reject the message coming from them than it would be for somebody who's a known political activist or somebody who is, well, like, say, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Oh, she's that Democrat. I'm not going to listen to anything she has to say. But you see a 16-year-old girl, whose friend was shot in cold blood right in front of her, saying we need to do something. Well, that's a little more sympathetic of an image to put out in front of this movement. But the media didn't touch the story until BuzzFeed 2 weeks after this whole movement got rolling. So,
well, what I find interesting is something you were telling me yesterday or the day before. It is a directive that came down from the education secretary, and
yes,
who was helping to sponsor that? It was another department within the federal government that essentially handed down these laws.
Education and Justice back in 2014. This was from January of 2014. Then Attorney General Eric Holder and then Secretary of Education Arne Duncan, who came out of Chicago, quoting from a story from the Washington Post back in 2014. Holder Duncan announced national guidelines on school discipline. Bringing new attention to harsh punishments in schools, federal officials Wednesday urged educators, and again, this is a 4-year-old article, urged educators across the country to move away from practices that suspend students for minor infractions and disproportionately affect minorities. That's the key phrase there. This was sent out in the form of a Dear Colleague letter. And I'd first heard of a Dear Colleague letter last year when the Department of Education well, no, I guess it wasn't last year because Trump was president all of last year. It was the year before already. Gosh, time does move faster when you get older. Threatening students or threatening schools, both high schools and government-funded colleges and universities, with the loss of Title IX funds if they didn't allow students to use the restroom or locker room that corresponded with their gender identity. And they based it on Title IX, which says there should be no discrimination based on sex.
Yes, and that's why calling this a guideline is a little disingenuous.
Yeah, basically, it's a threat.
Yeah.
The Dear Colleague letter is a nice way of saying, hi, if you would just basically allow students to do whatever they want without putting them on suspension, that would be great.
We're not telling you have to, but, we do control the purse strings.
Yeah, we'd hate to see you guys lose your federal funding over something like this. Well, at the time, there were some conservatives saying, hey, wait a minute. But again, the way this is presented, and they can show statistics showing that minority students do tend to be suspended in greater proportion than white or Asian students, who tend to be suspended less often. And unless somebody's got the guts to stand up and say, well, maybe there's a reason for that, because you can be accused of being racist. And that's, in America today, that seems to be like the worst possible thing. And conservatives seem willing to contort themselves into all kinds of shapes to avoid being called a racist.
Yes, but concomitant with this was, you told me about a directive to the police department.
Yeah, and this is where
it really gets weird.
I will link to this in the notes. The conservative blog called The Last Refuge, which is online at theconservativetreehouse.com, dug into this several years ago when Trayvon Martin was shot by George Zimmerman, and he found that, and the reason this Holder Duncan initiative issued by the Obama administration in 2014 is relevant is because they apparently used a program in place in Miami-Dade County schools and Broward County, Florida schools as the model, because those school districts showed a sharp reduction in minority in disciplinary action taken against minorities. The number of school suspensions dropped like 60% the first year they launched this program.
Mind you, you did not just say a reduction in incidents.
Correct.
Or misbehavior.
Correct. That is exactly the point. It resulted in essentially a free fire zone for kids. Once they realized, hey, they're not going to suspend us no matter what we do, well, then the gloves are off.
Yeah.
And that may have something to do with what happened on Valentine's Day at Stoneman Douglas High School. Because not only were the teachers told, don't suspend the kids, put them into other disciplinary tracks, when they did things that should have gotten them arrested, the police weren't notified. School resource officers were looking for creative ways to avoid writing up police reports. In the case of Trayvon Martin, when his backpack was searched because of an incident at the school, if I remember the story correctly, where somebody wrote on a locker with a Sharpie or a marker, magic marker, and they found in his backpack a baggie with marijuana residue. And that's why he was suspended and kind of wandering around George Zimmerman's neighborhood the day he got shot. There was also found in his backpack some jewelry that did not belong to him and a screwdriver, which police identified as a burglary tool. It turned out, according to The Last Refuge, that this jewelry belonged to the owner of a home in the neighborhood around the high school that Trayvon Martin was attending. But because they were under orders from the schools and from the police, and in Miami-Dade, they've got their own police department for the schools. Mm-hmm. You know, like a lot of college universities, the schools board in Miami-Dade is its own police force.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I know. The police were basically told, avoid writing this stuff up. They basically had quotas, and when you hit a number of arrests for the month, find ways not to get the kids in trouble. Well, of course, the gangs in Miami figured that out pretty quick, too. So they would wait until, they get toward the end of the month when the police had already hit their quota of juvenile arrests for the month. And they would do two things. First of all, use high school students for stuff that would have gotten the older guys arrested. And secondly, wait for the major crimes until the end of the month when the police had already hit their quota. Because they knew even if the kid was doing something that should have been a felony charge, they were going to find a way to get the kid off. And so the kid would be back in circulation and useful to the gang again shortly thereafter. But in Martin's case, this stuff that was found in his backpack was kept by the police and just entered into evidence as found items instead of recovered, stolen property.
What kind of item of evidence description is that? Found items?
Yeah. It's like, we don't know who this belongs to. We don't care. We're just going to hang on to it forever. And through FOIA requests, the main contributor at The Last Refuge was able to get documentation that this was going on. It prompted an internal investigation by the Miami-Dade County School District Police to find out who was leaking. Apparently, there's some police officers there who are really upset about this new direction. But this is not these are not the only places where this is going on. I first started down this path because I read The Last Refuge pretty much on a daily basis. His analysis of what's been going on here, what's been going on with the memos and the FBI's Fourth Amendment violations of Carter Page and the Trump administration have been, the best out there. But I had forgotten that he had done all this investigative work on the Trayvon Martin case years ago. And so he said, look, if Trayvon Martin had been perhaps referred to the police a few times, maybe he wouldn't have been on a life track when, that led to the encounter with George. He might still be alive. Yeah, I've taken a long way to say it. He might still be alive. In the case of Nicholas Cruz, he might not have been allowed to purchase a gun if there was a police record that would have showed up when they did the background checks.
Exactly. Yeah. I've always wondered about that. Yeah. Why they kept sort of ignoring it.
Right. So a reporter journalist by the name of Paul Sperry has been writing about this for a while. Sperry has been kind of going against the grain of mainstream media for a while. He's a conservative, but he also broaches topics that conservative media doesn't want to get into. He has been writing about this since 2015. And he writes now mainly for the New York Post. But he said that he points out, and I'll link to these articles as well. I've got them flagged rather than me trying to summarize the articles here. In a nutshell, he reports on teachers who've gone public in the years following the change in the federal guidelines in 2014 to say that the classroom is far less safe for teachers now than it was then. It's not just students who are fighting other students and not being suspended for it. Students are now, in many cases, feel free to go after teachers because they know they're not going to get in trouble, because the Department of Education has basically threatened school districts by saying, if you suspend a higher percentage of minority students than white or Asian students, we're going to pull your funding. And so school districts are like, okay, well, and again, Sperry says very clearly the rate of suspensions has declined, but the rate of infractions or incidents has not. In fact, it's gone up, which is, what you would expect. Kids aren't stupid. Gangs aren't stupid. You're basically giving them the freedom to do what they want. And the kids who are there, who actually are, which is the majority of them, good kids who don't want to get in fights, don't want to get in trouble. They aren't doing drugs. They aren't bringing guns to school. They're now so fearful of the bullies and the gangs. How are they supposed to learn anything? I mean, this is ridiculous. If the kids are causing trouble, if they're causing violence, especially if they raise a hand against a teacher, get them out of there. Mm-hmm. Get them out of there.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I think most of our listeners do too.
Yeah.
You can only say so much about this incident. It has been discussed at length by many podcasters.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move away from that, intentionally so, and discuss something that I think you might be able to make a case that is connected in a way. And that has to do with sperm counts.
Oh, okay.
There are environmental factors, health factors, and many other things, issues that are leading to a lowering of men's sperm counts. And I would argue that the net effect of that is fewer kids.
Yeah.
And if it is being caused by a change in the hormone balance within American males, then it may be changing behavior. One could even ask, if one were conspiratorial and wearing a tinfoil hat, which of course I have one, is this intentional? Are we going to turn the men into women so they're not as, they don't bother us as much and they're not as violent, and let's have fewer kids? The way to solve that is by lowering sperm counts.
Yeah. Huh. Boy, that's intriguing. There are so many implications to that. One of the things that is a major meme on college campuses, especially right now, is toxic masculinity. Mm-hmm.
I'd love to know how that's defined.
It's defined as anything
anything that's not metrosexual or a little more to the feminine side.
Radical feminists decide it is, basically, but.
Not Vikings.
Right.
Vikings would be right out.
More like beekeepers. Yeah, they'd be.
Less like the Tick and more like Arthur.
Yes. But you're right.
I don't want to.
The new Ticks. Well, yeah, it's a funny show.
The blue guy.
Yep. The
must be a Pict.
Yeah. And rhymes with tick.
I know.
Sort of. So the drop in sperm count that is disturbing, because I was just looking at this the other day. What was it? The drop over the last 50 years is something like 50 to 60% in most Western countries.
And that's a lot. The article, it's a Yahoo News, and the picture that whoever put this together on their website, the picture shows these four guys that just look so happy, standing by their grill, and they're eating their brats and their burgers, and they're wearing plaid shirts.
Looking like guys.
Real guys.
But
why don't we have any kids?
Exactly. And this is a long-term trend. I mean, we've seen the birth rates, fertility rates in Western nations dropping for decades now.
Precipitously dropping.
Yeah, to the point where in some parts of the advanced world, because in Japan it's this way as well, we're not even having children at a rate that will maintain our population.
No.
We've been told over and over again for years that overpopulation of the world is the biggest crisis facing humanity, and of course now it's been shifted to climate change. But that's not really true. I mean, the population of the planet, when you look at actual numbers, is supposed to peak in the middle of this century and start to decline. And when you look at
we can't even replace our current numbers.
Right. There are some serious implications to this. You can't have an economy. I mean, every year we're looking at how do we expand the economy. We're looking for 2 to 3% growth. Okay, well, perpetual motion machine aside, the only way that really is sustainable over a long period is if the population is growing at 2 to 3% a year. But that ain't happening if you're having fewer than 2.1 children per couple. And in the West and in Japan, that is true. The Russians recognize this, which is why they've been periodically over the last 10, 20 years having, go home and make a baby day today.
Oh, exactly. What is it? Nashi or whatever the name of that teens group that Putin started. He was having whole camps and he would have them almost like Sun Myung Moon. Everybody get married. Now go to your tents, make babies. Right.
But here in the West, we're being told... What was it? One of the commercials during the Super Bowl, there was no one right way to family. Yeah, family, as though that word is a verb now. Mm. Well, yeah, according to the Bible, there really is just one right way to family. One man, one woman, children, train them up in the way they should go and, be fruitful and multiply. Now, okay, I'm not saying we need to have all, 5, 10 kids each like our grandparents, great-grandparents, et cetera, did. But the fact remains, we have hit a plateau here in the West and in Japan, and the population is going to start declining. It's going to age. It's going to start aging. And once you get to a certain point, you can't have kids anymore.
It's already happened in Japan. And in China, they had the one-child policy for a long time.
Right.
And because of that, their numbers went down. And they had a surplus.
They dropped the policy.
Yes, they have. Because they're starting to realize, oops.
Yeah. You get to a certain, this is what's happening in Japan, and this is going to happen here in the United States as well, and Europe, as the population ages, and we've come to expect certain social benefits. I mean, let's be honest here. In the United States, we're not exactly a free market. We're sort of a hybrid free market socialist society. We really are. I mean, social security. There aren't going to be enough young people paying in to support us old people as we start collecting. Because that population curve, the bubble in the population curve is sliding to the right as we get older and older. Maybe that's why the elites want to keep letting immigrants in across the borders, because we need younger people in the country paying taxes.
I'd say that's very possibly part of the problem. However, if these younger people coming into the country start adopting our Western ways of consuming,
then great.
Then they're it is great for the economy for a while.
Right.
But their numbers will start to dwindle because they will start to have the same health issues we do.
Right.
One of those we discussed on Sci Friday, and that has to do with plastics.
Yes, because and I was going to come back to that, so I'm glad you bring it back. But the bigger question again is why? I mean, okay, look, it's one thing to use birth control to bring down the birth rate, the fertility rate, but something from outside is affecting the sperm count of men in the West. What's going on?
Well, it's hard to say. It could be that it's environmental.
Yeah.
It could be clothing.
Oh, yeah.
Let's face it. Tight jeans, bad idea.
You just... Yeah.
You really don't. But there may be other things that are altering the DNA. I mean, look at chemtrails.
Chemtrails, but there's also been studies that say, guys, don't carry your cell phone in your pockets, your pants pockets.
Yes, that is such a bad idea.
Seriously, because the radiation from your phone.
But even if you don't carry it in your pockets, there are so many Wi-Fi signals going throughout major cities. I would love to see the same study done regionally. Take a look at city dwellers versus country dwellers.
Good point. What kind of water are you drinking? Yeah. And here's another thing. This is something I'd forgotten. I flagged this last July, and I don't know that I ever talked about this. This was reported by the Christian Post. New research shows how the loss of a father significantly affects children at the level of their DNA.
Oh, I remember seeing that episode.
Kids raised
that story. Yeah.
Kids raised without a father have much shorter telomeres, the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes. This was reported by Deseret News, which is the Salt Lake City newspaper. Research done among 5,000 children born between 1998 and 2000 who were part of a federally funded Fragile Families and Child Wellbeing study, which was published in the journal Pediatrics. So that's a respected journal. Children whose fathers either died or were incarcerated before they were 5 years old, the effects on their telomeres were most pronounced. Father loss negatively impacted the telomeres of boys 40% more than it did the telomeres of girls. This relates back to the Florida story and the impact of fatherlessness on incidents like what happened at Stoneman Douglas High School.
Generally, these shooters tend to have troubled pasts, and oftentimes it relates to a broken home.
An author named Dr. Warren Farrell, who has written a new book called The Boy Crisis, wrote this. Minimal or no father involvement, whether due to divorce, death, or imprisonment, is common to Adam Lanza. He was the Sandy Hook shooter. Mm-hmm. Elliot Rodger from out in California. Dylan Roof in South Carolina, the church shooter. And Stephen Paddock, the Las Vegas shooter. The rate of mass shootings has tripled since 2011. We blame guns, violence in the media, violence in video games, and poor family values. Each is a plausible player. But our daughters live in the same homes with the same access to the same guns, video games, and media, and are raised with the same family values. Our daughters are not killing, our sons are. But boys with significant father involvement are not doing these shootings. Without dads as role models, boys' testosterone is not well channeled. The boy experiences a sense of purposelessness, a lack of boundary enforcement, rudderlessness, and often withdraws into video games and video porn. Terry Brennan, co-founder of Leading Women for Shared Parenting, notes 72% of adolescent murderers grew up without fathers.
72%?
The same for 60% of all rapists. 70% of juveniles at state institutions grew up in single or no parent situations. The number of single-parent households is a good predictor of violent crime in a community, while poverty rate is not. It's not a question of poverty. It's not a question of the role of fatherlessness, and perhaps even at a genetic level, is far more pronounced than we in our culture. Wow. There's no one right way to family. Oh, yes, there is. And the statistics show that there is.
Amen. Well said. Good grief. That's wow.
I know. And where has been the talk? We've even seen some discussion in the national media over the role played by psychotropic drugs. I mean, this kid, Nicholas Cruz, was taking drugs in order to try to keep his moods leveled.
But if the child is acting out from an early age because of lack of father-son interaction or lack of a father at all, then it's understandable.
Right.
The sad truth of our society is that if you are considered a bad seed in the classroom, then we're going to give you some drugs. That's the easiest way to fix it. Which
may only make a problem worse.
Yes.
If the child has no guidance, if he's rudderless, if he's looking to video games and video porn for role models that would normally have been provided by a father, then opening up those receptors to the spirit realm through drugs, pharmakia, makes it worse.
It's a perfect storm for oppression by the spirit realm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on an entirely different note, but still having to do with DNA.
Sorry, you thought you were out of that topic, and I pulled you back in. But I'm glad we came back to it because I wanted to get to that point, so I'm glad we came back to it.
Me too. Well, still having to do with DNA. I saw this article this morning, and I think it's really important that we discuss this briefly. We may even talk about it on Sci Friday eventually. And that has to do with this new diet that some people are going on. It's what's called a bespoke diet. In other words, it means that it's made just for you. A bespoke suit is tailored. Martin Keppelheim designs bespoke suits for Charles Sinclair.
Gotcha.
This idea of a diet that is just tailor-made for you, Derek Gilbert, based on your DNA. You send in your DNA to me, to my company, and I will take a look at it. I'll see what the problem areas are, and I will solve your problem with a special diet. Well, this reporter decided to do this, and he sent in his, man, not a man, but a woman, Eve Simmons. I have to look at the author. Eve Simmons sent this in, and she got back the DNA results. And mind you, she's considered on the underside of her BMI. Her BMI it's only 17.5. She's 5'4" tall, so she's about my height. BMI of 17.5, which is a little less than what mine is right now. And she was told by this company, you need to consume only 1,400 calories a day.
What?
Yeah, which barely would keep her the weight she is at.
Yeah.
Plus, she needed to start doing very high exercise programs. It was recommending this is what you need to do: high protein diet to manage your hunger, because clearly you have a problem with compulsive eating, according to your DNA.
And she's on the low end of BMI for normal.
She's actually, a low end of BMI for normal. So she's a little underweight, actually. And she was told to do this excessive aerobic activity every day because her PGC1A gene showed that she was going to have some problems in later life if she didn't do this now. So this diet was just ate up in the head. That's the bottom line. And so she didn't follow it.
Modern snake oil.
She did not follow the, and she even wrote to the CEO of this company and said, here's my deal, and your advice to me would, after 3 months, end my life, because I would lose so much weight in this next 3 months that I would die. And she's recommending, here's the bottom line. She says, the verdict, I might give the exercise a bit of a go. I didn't need a DNA test to tell me that my aversion to the gym right now may need some addressing, but the cutting-edge diet advice, I'll give it a miss. So if you're thinking I'm going to send my DNA in and they're going to tell me exactly what I need to eat for my blood type or my DNA, look, this is snake oil. This is just somebody's way of making a buck. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Eat a wide variety of good, healthy foods. Make them as simple as possible. The least you play around with food, the more natural it is.
Yes.
I do recommend cooking the meat. Don't eat the raw meat.
No.
But raw veggies when you can. These things are good for you, especially if you grow the vegetables yourself and you buy the meat locally and you get the milk locally.
Right.
So as unprocessed as possible.
We've done a number of interviews recently with doctors that Joe Horn consulted for his forthcoming book.
And that book is going to change lives.
Yes, it will, because Joe's life has been changed. I mean, he looks, when you see him on camera, he looks, healthy. He's a young man. He's, not quite 40 years old yet. He's had a number of health issues. But he's had a number of health issues, right. And he has struggled. And it turned out that a lot of things he was doing that he thought were healthy, when he went to specialists in naturopathic medicine and those who look at how to change diet in order to change your health, found that he was basically making things worse by eating things to which he had a sensitivity. And
because he thought that they were really healthy.
Right. There are some foods that to most people would be considered healthy. But it's possible that, not everybody can digest, say, green tea.
Now, mind
properly.
you, Joe has specific health issues that
correct.
are just hereditary. So
Right.
he was born with some issues with regard to what he can and cannot eat.
Right.
If you have no particular health problem with digesting certain foods, then the bottom line of what I just said is it. You need to eat a variety of foods. Joe has a long list of things he cannot eat.
Right. But what came out of those interviews was essentially what you just said, was that the closer the food is to the way it came out of the ground, to the way God made it, out of the ground or off the animal, the better off you are. Unless you have certain specific issues, like Joe and like others, dealing with things like leaky gut syndrome or what have you, then just getting more natural and relying less on processed foods, processed meats, processed flours, simple carbohydrates, which has become those things have become a staple of the American diet, which is why so many of us are so, overweight and in some cases morbidly obese.
And lethargic. We just do not feel well because we're not nourishing the cells so we can function.
Like my previous career in the steel business, and this is in the news because of President Trump's announcement this past week. He's levying tariffs on imported Chinese, specifically steel and aluminum. We found, even going back to my steel pipe days, where most of the pipe that we were purchasing for the company I worked for to stock and distribute was import, we still stayed away from pipe produced in certain countries because there's standards of quality. We're just not up to what's necessary if you're actually going to build something that's going to last.
Yeah.
We would not touch Chinese material. It's not all bad, but it's not worth the risk either.
Do you really want to drive over the bridge?
Yeah, exactly. So when you've got a bridge that's built with material that may not meet the exacting standards of the ASTM or ASME here in the United States, no, I don't think so. I think we'd rather pay a little bit more and make sure that what's gone into that building or that bridge or that boiler or that pressure vessel is actually, is what the standard says it has to be. That we know that this piece of steel is going to contain, so many thousands of pounds per square inch of pressure. Then you'll pay a little bit more and you'll use the material that you need in order to make this thing work the way it is. But yet, when it comes to our bodies, instead of doing the same thing and saying, okay, yeah, maybe it's going to it'll cost a little more to buy the organic or to go to the farm and the farmer's market and buy this stuff or grow it ourselves or whatever, and eat that. It's so much faster to just run through the drive-thru and get some fast food.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you and I have really changed the way we eat.
Yes, we have, because we were
2 years.
Fast food. I was going to McDonald's or Hardee's or Arby's every single day when I was out on the road for the last couple of years. So, not anymore.
No, we just do not eat that way, and we feel a whole lot better, and we're in much smaller sizes. So you need to get Joe on VFTB.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to get Donna on too,
and Allie, because Allie helped to write the book.
She did, and
Allie Anderson, and
she had a different take on it because. I won't go into her situation. I'll let her explain it because I don't want to, reveal things that she doesn't want revealed. But she was not like Joe dealing with health issues for herself, but she had other concerns as a parent. So anyway, it really is a difference. It's kind of funny that we were a couple of weeks ago. I'd realized that for the first time in probably 6 or 7 years, I'd not had my annual winter cold / sinus infection, which one year turned into walking pneumonia. Because the last 18 months or so, every morning I'm eating a big healthy bowl of probiotics, homemade yogurt, which Sharon makes with yogurt starter.
It's really easy to make too. We just use local dairy milk
and a starter from that you purchase through Amazon.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, then last night I started feeling, I got that stuff coming on. So
I think that was stuff coming through the window. I really do. I think it's just that time of year. I think it's allergies.
But yeah, you remember when we got to, especially when we got to Illinois, because every year it would hit just about the time the barbershop chorus was getting ready to do its annual Christmas benefit concert, and suddenly I couldn't sing because I was, all congested and plugged up. But this year it didn't happen.
No,
because I think the probiotics, gut health, because of eating better is better, and that affects your overall sense of well-being. So.
Yeah, I'm drinking tea today. That's been kind of nice.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how much time we have left, but we need to cover
about another 10 minutes or so.
We need to cover a couple of important animal stories.
Oh, yes.
One of those has to do with nutria in California. I saw this.
Yes.
We've talked about this. Have we talked about it on PID Radio or on nutria? They're big swamp rats. They're really big. They look like groundhogs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're big.
Yeah.
Like 30, 40 pounds based on what I can see.
It's like super groundhogs.
Super great. Yeah, indeed. Sam just goes, yum. The article is titled, "Giant swamp rats are poised to dig into California. Should we eat them?"
Well, yeah. I mean, it's them or us. So.
Well, honestly, I think in eastern Kentucky, where my parents grew up, they probably would have just thought, hey, why not?
Yeah.
Because honestly, there are a lot of critters that you and I would go, ew, at, but they're considered delicacies.
Well, 200 years ago, our ancestors who were populating the western frontier of Kentucky and Ohio were making regular meals out of possum and raccoon. So, the nutria, however you pronounce it, is native to South America. It was brought into California years and years ago, and I don't know why they were introduced into the state. They were apparently, there was a program launched in California to get rid of them back in the 60s and in 70s rather. They were thought to have been eradicated in the 70s, but now they're making a comeback.
They're moving along the waterways. It says they're 20 pounds. So not quite as big as I thought they were, but still a 20-pound rat.
Yeah.
Essentially a 20-pound rodent.
Oh, I see.
These are big.
Yeah, Louisiana, they were brought in to breed for their fur, but some of them broke free and then quickly reproduced. And, of course, as often happens, like with, kudzu, it's an ornamental. It's ground cover. It's covering the houses. It's covering.
Probably fine. Oh, gosh. The other story I had to address is there was the fun. Hi, Sam. Where are the giant rats? I want to see them. There was a story that I thought was hilarious. It was posted by a police department, and supposedly someone called in an alarming tale that they had seen a cat sitting in a tree with an AR-15. And this cat was ready to take down the neighborhood. And you look at the video, and sure enough, or at least the picture that was posted with the story at Twitter, there's this cat, sure enough, sitting in a tree, and it looks for all the world like it's got this little bitty cat-sized
like it's got a gun.
And it turns out to be a branch that looked remarkably like a semi-automatic weapon. But the police, they made the best of it, and they thought it was pretty funny, all things considered. But it comes down to the truth that cats are evil.
Well, yeah. And in fact, there's a new study that confirms this. This was linked at an article linked by the Orlando Sentinel. The article was actually summarizing a study done by researchers at the University of Edinburgh. It didn't quite say what the guy at the Orlando Sentinel says. It's like a columnist who was, looking for a funny story. Essentially, what the researchers at the University of Edinburgh did was they compared domestic cats to certain larger felines that are in captivity, including I don't have the study yet.
Leopards,
tigers, and African lions. And basically found that cats share many of the personality characteristics of African lions, including what they call dominance and
neurotic behavior.
Neurotic behavior, yeah. And so the columnist for the Orlando Sentinel concluded that your house cat would kill you if it was just large enough to do so.
Well, here's the thing. If we get a cat large enough to go after the swamp rats in California,
that's it.
We need to bring them in to Louisiana and set them loose in the countryside, right?
Yes. What could possibly go wrong?
Nothing. And we'll give them AR-15 branches, put them into trees.
As snipers. To take out the nutria.
Oh, lest you are a cat lover out there. I say cats are evil, and it's really tongue-in-cheek because we've had cats here involuntarily, mind you, just dropped off at our property because we live out in the country.
They were awfully cute.
We kept them for weeks and weeks and weeks until they got old enough, and we rehomed them. We honestly, I think cats are sweet. I do. It's just I'm not a cat person, but I'm happy to live and let live. As long as the cat's not out to kill me or eat me.
Right.
Then all right, we'll keep you around. You got to take the mice population down. So what California probably needs are more cats.
More cats, sure. So, Mom's got a couple of cats, and she's happy having them around. It keeps they keep her company, and so that's
Sam
fine.
does not like cats. That's why we didn't keep any of them, not even as a barn cat. He does not like cats.
No, he was clearly very tense when they were hanging out on the deck, kind of, hey, let us in.
Yeah, it isn't that he goes after the cats. It's that they really make him neurotic. He wouldn't even go to the slider. His food bowl and water bowl are right by the slider into our deck, and he hated going over there because the cats would stare at him.
They'd sit there and stare at him. You gonna eat all that? You gonna eat all that? I mean, looks pretty good.
Can I get you? Can I come right through there?
Yeah, it was. That was an interesting period of our lives.
It was strange getting up that morning that they'd been dumped off overnight and just seeing all these little shadows on the deck. It's like, what is going on out there?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. So anyway, just a bit of humor. Again, we wish no ill to any creature that God has created.
We really don't. We're pretty soft-hearted.
Now there's some
when it
like
comes
maybe
to
mosquitoes. I don't like those.
That's why we keep hummingbirds around.
Yes. Actually.
Seriously, we don't get mosquitoes because we keep hummers. We put hummingbird feed out all the time.
Right. And I imagine that keeps the fly population down, too.
It does. We hardly have any flies out there either.
That's amazing. The first summer we were here, we had to hang fly strips in the house.
But
not really decorative, but once we got the hummingbirds.
Once the hummingbirds came in, they take down all those things.
Yeah.
The hummingbird feed is just to give them the energy to go after the bugs.
And bear in mind, we live surrounded by cattle property. So we should have more flies here than we do. That's yeah. So we treat the hummingbirds well, and we're keeping watch on the sightings of the hummingbirds as they move further north. So waiting for their return.
They should be here in about 6 weeks.
Well, we got a fun week coming up. If the weather allows, and I've not checked the weather to see whether this is going to happen, but Carl Teichrob may be making the trip down to the Ozarks.
I hope he does.
But they're expecting a major winter storm, Winter Storm Quinn.
The Mighty Quinn.
The Mighty Quinn coming across Manitoba and could drop as much as 20 inches of snow. So Carl may not make it to the airport, much less make it out of the airport. But we'll see. We're also going to go down to Blue Eye again this week, visit with our friend Sean Tabbitt.
Yeah, if you're in the area, we're going to be there on Tuesday morning. Yeah. So, come down and say hi. I think the recording starts at either 11 or 12. I can't remember which
11, I think. But we'll be down there for that. And just 3 weeks now to the
less than 3 weeks, 18 days.
Yeah. So anyway, we'll be down in Dallas for the Hear the Watchman conference. And I did finally open up my presentation last night and looked at it. And I think it's pretty close to,
Okay,
I may tweak a little bit, but I don't think it needs a lot of tweaking. In fact, when I gave it in Oklahoma City in the fall, I had more in there than I really was able to speak, because I had a 60-minute time limit or 45-minute time limit, and here I've got hour and a half. So I think I may be able to give the whole presentation this time. So it'll be like a new one, because I'll be able to give all the stuff that I had to skip over.
Yeah. Yay. And you were skipping over things. And we want to thank Carl Gallups again. He's been kind enough to agree to be your warm-up act.
Second year in a row.
I know.
Yeah, so that's pretty amazing. Yeah, their schedule is online now at hearthewatchmen.com. You can see the entire schedule. And once again, Carl bats lead off, and I'm hitting second. So we'll have to hit and run on. So I'll lay down the bunt while Carl steals second. And that will be on Friday morning. But we're looking forward to it. Josh and Christina Peck will be there. Zev Parat will be there again.
Ray Gano, Bill Salas.
Yep.
L.A.
Marzulli.
Yeah. It's a great crew. To those of you who've already gotten your tickets, we are looking forward to saying hi. If you have not already registered, I think they're full, so you may not be able to get in.
Right.
You can always try to find out, but you can stream it.
Yes. The streaming is not live in real time. It's sort of like a tape delay. But
it's like about an hour delay. It's
right.
Not much.
What they do is they record it and then upload it to a site. Vimeo is the service they use, so that if there are any interruptions in the internet connection, it won't interrupt a live stream. It might slow down an upload, but it doesn't matter. Once it's uploaded to Vimeo, their servers are really robust. I mean, we use Vimeo to serve up the video for Skywatch TV's Roku channel and Apple TV channel and our mobile
really
app.
Good.
So,
and this is a hotel where a lot of people are going to be using their smart, devices to be online at the same time. So you do not want to depend solely upon the internet connection for a live stream.
Exactly right. So
it's a great idea.
$49, and the videos are available for 6 months after the conference, but you can save 20% with the promo code Gilbert20. That's Gilbert20, not Peck20, not Gallups20.
Don't use those.
Don't use those. Use Gilbert20, and that will get you 20% off the $49 fee. But again, with 6 months to go back and watch them again, that's a really good deal. Invite friends over who may not have heard of us. May not have heard of Carl Gallups.
Don't invite swamp rats.
No.
Don't. And don't kiss chickens. We keep telling you people that, but nobody's listening. In California, the same place that has the swamp rats,
Silicon Valley.
They're raising lap chickens.
In Silicon Valley.
Silicon Valley, they're raising lap chickens, and they're raising them as pets. Yeah. Look, don't kiss chickens.
No. They have no lips. What's the point? It's no good.
It hurts. I don't know why I keep doing this.
Check out the show notes at PIDradio.com. We've got a new Bible study up on the book of Ezekiel at gilberthouse.org. And, of course, you can download the mobile app for the Gilbert House Fellowship at the website, gilberthouse.org. And a new interview going up at vftb.net tonight. A new friend, Daniel Currier, who I actually met while I was traveling the highways and byways as a steel salesman. Yeah.
Back in the day?
Yeah. An engineer who understands there's no conflict between science and scripture.
I bet he does math really well.
He does.
We'll know who to call.
Exactly. Until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for listening. PID Radio is a production of Gilbert House Ministries. The opening theme is adapted from The Alchemist's Tower by Kevin MacLeod, www.incompetech.com. The closing theme is Right Light by Joe Horn and Broken for Good. Find their album Right Where You Stand at Spotify and the iTunes Music Store. Our website is PIDradio.com, where you'll find the show notes, links to our personal websites, and links to connect with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The content of this program is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution No Derivatives 4.0 International License. For more information, see creativecommons.org.
I woke up this morning with some aching in my head. Darkness could have stuck around and filled my day with dread, but it's gonna be alright. Gonna be just fine for me. Turning on the right light, it's gonna set me free. This life seems way too willing to try and knock me down. I just know there's a way I can turn it all around. It's gonna be alright. Gonna be just fine for me. Turning on the right light, it's gonna set me free.